February the 1st, 1979. Punk hardman Sid Vicious wakes up in a New York jail charged with murder. But in spite of the charge, he'll soon be a free man.
He was released into the custody of his mother, who then, goes out and buys drugs for her son.
He was trying on clothes, playing air guitar, jumping around.
Both hands are just dripping with blood.
He wanted her to inject into him, and she said no, she wouldn't do that.
In 24 hours, Sid Vicious will be dead from a fatal overdose of heroin.
I was part and parcel of supplying him with something which probably was responsible for killing him off.
February the 1st, 1979. Sid Vicious is held at the Rikers Island detention center just across from Manhattan, New York. This is the beginning of his last 24 hours alive. For Sid, this is a living nightmare. He's charged with murdering his girlfriend, Nancy Spungen, but has no recollection of the attack. He'd been out of his mind on drugs, but all he remembers is that when he woke up, Nancy was dead. Now one thought terrorizes him. Did he do it? For 55 days, Sid, a heroin addict, has gone through the agony of withdrawal. On top of all this, he's been subjected to humiliating attacks.
He apparently was raped, he was abused, he was beaten up. Everything that is your worst nightmare that would happen to you in prison. I mean, how could anybody cope with that?
At dawn, Sid is woken and taken from his cell. He's hoping the nightmare is over and that he'll never have to return to prison. His lawyers believe they can beat the murder charge, and later today they'll make their case to get him out on bail. Sid's hearing is scheduled for noon.
I was dealing with a 21-year-old kid, transplanted from the UK to the United States in a big problem.
As Sid leaves Rikers Island behind him, the clock is ticking on his final day. Step back 3 years to London, 1976. It's the summer that Britain found punk.
It was a fashion thing, it was a music thing, and I just think everybody just locked onto the same vibe at the same time. I think that's what it was all about, that's what punk was, and I don't really think... OK, we had a dwarf, there was Helen, yes, there was a lot of gay guys there, yes, there were a few sort of like lesbians, yes, there was some hookers. It was this whole mix, but that was London at the time. I mean, this is what was going on. Everyone was young, we were all doing really strange things.
It was very outrageous for that time. I mean, we really pissed a lot of people off just because of the way we looked.
Back then, Sid Vicious was a shy 19-year-old called John Simon Ritchie.
He looked more like a sort of James Dean character. He had like slick black hair, big sort of studded wristband. Sid had this shy little boy, lost childlike quality, I think he had about him.
Ritchie was drawn to the emerging punk scene and started hanging out at the Sex Clothes shop on King's Road.
It was a place where something magical might happen if you hung around long enough. And I think that was always a kind of gave everybody a sense of purpose to dwell and to make that pilgrimage from wherever in the UK to this store.
John Ritchie was one of the many punks who made that pilgrimage.
I always liked him, I have to say, and there was something warm about him. He was just very genuinely just a nice person. I mean, so, yeah, he stuck around. I mean, I think he was probably stealing the clothes as much as anybody else was.
John Ritchie was close to Punk's inner circle. One of his best mates was John Lydon, the lead singer of the notorious band the Sex Pistols.
He pushed himself into the scene, you know, so that when the papers started to write about the Pistols and the whole punk thing, you know, he was one of the first things that were mentioned. He went hand in hand with the sort of growth of punk and particularly Pistols.
He didn't quite know what he wanted to do, Sid, but you just knew he was waiting to sort of like fit in somewhere.
When the group did set out to play in a number of pubs around London, this tall, somewhat stalwart creature did show up, and we nicknamed him.
Lydon was given the name Johnny Rotten after his bad teeth, while Ritchie was given the name Sid Vicious, not because of any violent tendencies, but after Lydon's pet hamster, Vicious. It was all a bit of a joke.
Yeah, he was around, you'd see him, and I just thought he was a bit of a burp, to be honest.
Sid was complete marshmallow, really, you know. He's like, we were like playing with children and playing games. And he loved all of that, and like, and he was a big softie.
Now the shy and slightly goofy John Simon Ritchie had a new name, Sid Vicious. He'd spend the rest of his life trying to live up to it. Sid has 20 hours left to live. He's escorted from Rikers Island to the New York Criminal Court. He's been accused of murdering his girlfriend, Nancy Spungen, but his lawyers are certain they can get him out on bail. They argue that Sid is innocent and that Nancy was probably killed by a drug dealer who wanted to steal her money.
There were a number of other people who lived in the area, in the hotel, and who were supplying drugs to these people, who had opportunities and access to these people. And it was not unlikely that someone could have come in and attempted to assault them. We were very optimistic that the prosecution would not be in a position to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he was responsible.
Sid was gonna get off, we all hoped. Bailey was gonna do an excellent job. His bill was gonna be astronomic. And Sid was gonna play Las Vegas and pay for it. That was it.
But first, Sid's lawyers have to get him out of jail. They persuade the judge to release him, but only if someone can stump up £30,000 in bail money.
I had the money. It wasn't a question. I was not going to use it. I used it immediately.
At 10 a.m., Sid is released.
He was certainly relieved to know he was being released. The last thing that I said to him was, I'll be in touch with you, just be careful.
Sid is free, and his lawyers set about preparing his defense. But in less than 19 hours, Sid will be dead. 2 years earlier, and punk was declaring anarchy in the UK. Some saw it as a threat to the very foundations of civilization. The Sex Pistols were at the front line of the movement, and Sid was in the crowd at every gig, living up to his new nickname.
Whenever we played, there would seem to be some kind of altercation going on, which seemed to be Sid trying to get a bit of the limelight for himself.
Sid was determined to make his mark and create his own brand of anarchy. In one incident, he attacked a rock critic with a bike chain just because he'd given his favourite band a bad write-up.
Just be completely destructive and you'd get really pissed, really out of it, start lunging around. You know, usually if he did start a fight, he was one who got worse anyway.
Sid was one of these extraordinary people who could have had the words willing prey tattooed on his forehead, because that's what he really was.
And it seemed to me he had this kind of slightly masochistic quality about him, that he'd like to start a fight so maybe in the end he would get an hiding, and he did get a hiding from a good few people that he picked on. He picked on the wrong blokes.
He had a gift for provocation. He did invent that strange kind of dance that became known as the pogo.
Sid's violent outbursts got him noticed and eventually won him his dream job. When bass player Glenn Matlock left the band, McLaren chose Sid as his replacement.
Sid was the most perfect choice to move into that part. I mean, as much as he really couldn't play anything. But hey, listen, didn't matter, did it? It was all about the image.
Becoming a Sex Pistol, I mean, it's probably a dream come true in a way. You know, from being their #1 fan, he was now in the band.
There was no question you couldn't take your eyes off him. He shone so much more brightly than anyone else. When he ever boarded the stage, the audience would always squeeze themselves all over to the left side, because all they wanted to do was be as close as possible to Sid. And Sid would spend sometimes half the show constantly talking to them.
Within months of joining the band, Sid had become the main attraction, turning his stage act into a bloody sideshow.
I just remember at one point him sitting on the bar and he was just covered in blood. I think he'd just broken the bottle and he just started slashing himself.
I used to sort of like put cigarettes on my arm and watch them burn down, and I used to slash that open. You know, I used to rip Coke cans in half to get the jagged edge so you could get a real nice cut and stuff. And I'd never seen Sid doing any of that until he'd seen me doing it.
Charles Wells is a juvenile psychologist who studied Sid's life.
People in the audience would look at him horrified. What kind of person would do this? And their response feeds his sense of self as being different, as being special. He's focused his energies and his efforts on creating an identity, one which doesn't seem to be true to who he perhaps really was. He's trapped by this, because in the end, it's what people want to see. They don't want to see who you really are.
The quiet, shy John Simon Ritchie had transformed himself into the ultimate punk icon, Sid Vicious. Sid has 17 hours left to live. He's out on bail expecting a hero's welcome. But McLaren, who's organised Sid's release, isn't there to meet him. He's in London, being sued by John Lydon for control of the Sex Pistols.
I regret not having been there, but, you know, I had a bloody huge court case mounting on my head at the same time. And you couldn't be in both places at once. It was really hard.
In fact, as Sid walks free, he's met by just his mum, Anne, and an old friend, Peter Kodik.
I recall that moment so well because I think now, when I look back on it, I would preferred him to stay in Rikers Island.
Sid's had a crippling heroin addiction for a year now. In prison, he was denied access to the drug. Now, he's only got one thing on his mind.
Walking down the street is like, I think, you know, Sid kept saying, you know, did you get it? Did you get it, Mom? Did you get it? Yeah. Yes, Sid, you know? Okay. Walk, faster, faster.
Sid is anxious to get to his mother's hotel, a few blocks from the courthouse. Just before his release, his mum told the papers that what Sid was looking forward to the most was a giant ice cream. But in a bizarre act of motherly love, she's bought her son what he really wants: heroin. It's only an hour since Sid was released on bail with a murder charge hanging over his head. In 16 hours, he'll kill himself. Or that's how the story goes. But according to one eyewitness, Sid didn't kill himself. He was killed by someone else. Sid Vicious has 16 hours left to live. He's been released on bail accused of murdering his girlfriend, Nancy Spungen. Sid's body is clean of drugs for the first time in years, but not for long. Sid's with his mum and a friend, Peter Kodik. His mum's bought him heroin he's now desperate to inject.
He was released into the custody of his mother, who then, goes out and buys drugs for her son. You know, it's unbelievable to me that that would have happened.
Because of heroin as being an addictive substance, in some ways it keeps Sid in the relationship with his mother and perhaps prevents him from truly separating and achieving independence.
For as long as they can both remember, Sid and his mum have taken drugs together. Soon those drugs will kill her only son. Sid Vicious was born in South London on May the 27th, 1957. His father left home when he was 2 years old. In his absence, Sid forged a strong bond with his mother. She was more of a friend than a parent, and she came to dominate Sid's life.
She was poor, and she had a kid. So it wasn't even like she was a single working mother. It was just Sid and Ann, you know? And she was kind of a hippie or a beatnik, I suppose. Free spirit.
Sid's mum led a chaotic life, moving from place to place and doing whatever she had to survive.
And then she moved to Ibiza, Spain for a little while and took Sid with her.
Because she'd been part of the hippie movement back home in England, she would charge sailors to roll joints. That was her way of kind of hustling a couple of quid to keep the kid in a slightly better life.
One of the possible consequences is, again, finding it difficult to develop a clear identity. And if a young person has never stayed in a place long enough to establish long enough relationships with peers, then they will miss out on that, and it will be perhaps more difficult for them to say, you know, who am I?
She heard a rumor from a friend of hers that if you were heroin dependent or drug dependent, you could get a free flat. You could be moved up the housing list in like no time. So she just literally said she was heroin dependent, and she got this flat. Of course, the downside to that is you're living in a world surrounded by heroin dependent people.
By the time Sid was 7, his mum was addicted to heroin.
I visited his house where his mother lived. His mother was a dope dealer. It was quite clear. She was always in the kitchen cooking up something or other.
It would have been a very obvious and regular sight to come home and find Mum flaked across 2 mattresses with a syringe in one arm.
I mean, my first memory of him is sort of like people emptying pills into his hands and him just shoving it in his mouth and then asking what the pills were.
Seeing his mother using a needle encouraged teenage Sid to experiment.
Some people are taking speed or amphetamine sulfate, and some people are experimenting with it. And because Mum's got things like old metal syringes that you've got to boil, wash, and you can use 100 or 1,000 times, he's turning up and going, actually, man, you get a better kick out of it if you inject it.
Well, I'd take mass amounts of anything. It'd take downers, speeds, dexys, bombers, blues, amphetamine sulfate, which was, of course, the drug of choice of all punks and everything, and we all used to take loads of that. Anything that would be stuck in front of him, Sid would inject. So I said, I mean, you know, it could be Tuinol, it could be speeds, cocaine, heroin. The more things, the better, really.
Some images that are completely burned on my memory forever from that period, and one of them is Anne's boyfriend selling Sid drugs, heroin, literally in front of me. And I thought, you know, that was it as far as I was concerned. I mean, there was no clearer picture of what it was all about.
By his own admission, Sid injected speed up to 14 times a day.
It's highly significant that his mother was a heroin addict in the past. The adults in a child's relationship act as models. And, for instance, in a home where there is a lot of open drug use, then this would become normal for that child.
Despite the unconventional upbringing, Sid and his mother were very close. But her inability to say no to her son would end in tragedy. Sid has 13 hours left to live. He arrives at his mother's hotel, eager to take the heroin she bought for him.
He's back out, faced with things he was faced with before. Often addicts talk about their drug as their best friend, their lover.
Sid and his mum know he's taking a massive risk injecting a large dose of heroin, especially now his body's clean.
One could see his mother supplying him with drugs as an act of care. Perhaps she recognized the pain he was in psychologically and emotionally and was doing what she could to take the pain away. There is this association with happier times in his life, the times that he's used with his lover Nancy, and there could even be a recreation of that in using it with other people who he counts as his close friends and his family.
Michael Baden is a heroin expert and the coroner who carried out the autopsy on Sid's body.
In 55 days, he wouldn't have had any tolerance left, and he would have had to have started off at a low dose of heroin. It's very common for people who have been addicted to heroin, who go to jail. If they're not careful on their first dose, they can die.
What had been sold to her was absolute rubbish.
I'm sorry, Simon.
It's rubbish.
I'm sorry, Simon.
Sorry? You think I want to hear sorry? Shut up.
Which left him even more disappointed and even more angry. Everything that he was waiting for, this big hit that he was waiting for after he got out of the court, wasn't going to happen.
Peter, you know how I like your photography?
Desperate for a fix, Sid turns to his friend, Peter Kodik.
Sort me out, yeah? Peter?
As a rock photographer, Kodik knows the New York drug scene, and Sid knows he can be relied upon to source high-grade heroin, paid for by his mum.
That's what I want to hear. Brilliant.
I said I'd see what I could do, and I'd see him later on that evening. She probably must have given me, say, between, let's say, $100, $150.
Kodik leaves to score the heroin Sid craves. Sid waits with his mother. Even though she now seems happy to supply her son with the drug, she wasn't the one who got him hooked. For that, Sid can thank the other woman in his life, Nancy. Two years earlier, and just weeks after joining the Sex Pistols, Sid's notorious antics have put him at the forefront of punk. One night, he ended up crashed out on the floor with his mate Johnny Rotten and an American groupie called Nancy Spungen.
She rolled over to John and tried to fuck him. And I think he wasn't cooperative. And so she rolled the other way, and Sid was. And I think that was it, really. Sid lost his virginity to Nancy. As a second choice, I have to say.
Nancy had come to London on a mission to bed a Sex Pistol, and now she'd got one, she wasn't going to let him go.
Hey, do you want to make a pornographic movie? Give us £100.
Sid was very immature, he was very insecure, and she was ideal for him, you know, because he was one saying that you're the star, and which, you know, when you're insecure is what you need.
Sid was like really shining out, and John was being like nothing. You know, he just wasn't giving it anymore.
Once more, Sid had put his trust in a habitual drug user. Nancy had been a heroin addict from the age of 14.
I think she just had one thing on her mind all the time. It was like where her next fix was coming from, more than anything else.
Sid had been injecting speed with his mum for years. Within days of meeting Nancy, he took heroin for the first time.
Nancy's influence was twofold. One was that she told him he was great, and second, she told him that he's even better when you take smack.
The heroin took a hold, yes, that sort of changed his personality, as obviously it would, and he took to it, unfortunately, like a duck to water.
One might imagine that in that relationship, he was able to find acceptance of himself as a man, perhaps. And this would, of course, increase his level of attachment and devotion to her.
Nancy would sort of say to Sid, well, you know, I'll have this, but, you know, you can't handle that much, you know, that kind of thing. So he'd be like, yes, I can.
Sid, damn you!
Within a month, Sid was hooked and using heroin every day.
It wasn't anything I could do, but to see it happening, it was like seeing somebody come down with a fatal disease in front of your eyes.
Sid had finally broken his dependency on his mother and replaced her with Nancy. But with Nancy came heroin, the drug that would eventually kill him.
What was the next question? What was that question again?
It's early evening. Sid Vicious has 9 hours left to live. Sid and his mum Anne take a cab across New York to a small apartment in Greenwich Village, where she's arranged a party to celebrate his first day of freedom.
So what was it like in there, man? Rikers, how was it?
The apartment is owned by Michelle Robinson, a 22-year-old actress. Sid started sleeping with Michelle shortly after Nancy's death. She was one of the last people to spend time with Sid before he was detained at Rikers Island.
I'll tell you what, you'd be popular in
Also at the party is Eileen Polk, a New York punk who's a friend of Sid's mum.
What are you gonna do next, then? We were all in the bedroom when the party started out. He was hopeful in the early part of the day that he'd be acquitted and he'd be able to be playing music again, put a band together. With Sid and Ann, it wasn't like mother and son. It was like they were partners in whatever crime, the hell they were creating, whatever it was. She was his friend more than his mother. She cared about him a lot and took care of him when she could, like a mother. But she was considered one of the gang.
At 8 p.m., while Peter Kodik searches the streets for heroin, Anne cooks her son's favourite meal, spaghetti bolognese. Sid had been in good form all afternoon.
He had been so positive. While we were cooking dinner, he was trying on clothes, playing air guitar, jumping around. It was like the Sid that I knew was always there deep inside, but circumstances made it hard for that good-humored person to come out, especially in the recent past.
One of the things in treating depressed people that you always watch for, because if you see that their mood suddenly starts to get better, one of the things you have to be very suspicious of is that they haven't decided that they're really going to kill themselves, because their mood usually picks up when they do. They're no longer in confusion and in conflict.
But around midnight, Peter Kodik and a friend arrive at the party.
The atmosphere changed. The atmosphere of the party changed.
Peter, you naughty little girl.
Kodik has kept his promise and scored. Sid can finally take the high-quality heroin he's been craving all day. Just a year earlier, and Sid's escalating drug use was taking its toll. Sex Pistols were beginning to fall apart, and everyone blamed Nancy.
I'd have everyone coming up to me and going, that bitch, that slag, why the hell didn't she fuck off? She was a hooker, she was a drug addict, she was the worst possible influence for Sid. And then Sid would come and say, she's great, she's really beautiful.
In a botched attempt to get Sid off drugs, Malcolm McLaren sent the band on tour.
This is how unscheming Malcolm was. Malcolm felt that Sid was taking smack because the band weren't gigging, and so he was just bored and he was frustrated. So Malcolm thought, we have to get some gigs for the band, so he sent them to Holland. To keep Sid off smack, you send him to Holland, which is the most dumb thing you can do.
Well, it's always difficult to cope with people who are heroin addicts, particularly if you're not and you don't have a lot of experience in that world.
He was good at sort of like promoting the controversy. I think that was it, but I don't think in any other area he knew what he was doing. He might have thought he wanted to be a rock and roll manager, but he certainly wasn't acting like one.
There was nothing fatherly about me. I was very much a Machiavellian, mischievous kid myself. I was not the obvious manager. I mean, the record industry was terrified of me as a manager because I actually adored mismanaging. We tried to cold turkey him in Holland.
Every night, people had to be with Sid all the time to stop people giving him smack. And it was something you really dreaded, because he'd be, you know, he'd like become petulant, he'd get stroppy like smack addicts do when they can't get that fixed.
We would not allow him to go to the toilet without a roadie present. Boogie, another roadie, had to smash the door in, only to see Sid sitting on the toilet saying, "You can't even have a shit in peace."
He went from having that very charming naivety to being a right pain in the arse.
More often than not, Sid got his way and took more heroin. So when the band returned to London, McLaren came up with another plan. He'd remove the supplier, Nancy.
We beat up his girlfriend, Nancy, I have to be honest with you. Wrapped her up, threw her in the back of this car, and the roadie, Roden, I think it was, his job was to drive her straight to Heathrow and put her on the first flight back to the US.
It was Boogie, Sophie and me trying to hustle Nancy into a cab.
Soon the kidnap attempt ran into trouble.
She kind of managed to break open the back door of the car and roll out into the curb as a policeman came strolling by, and she was just screaming, "I've been kidnapped by the Sex Pistols! Help!"
McLaren's efforts were in vain. In January 1978, in a haze of heroin and bitter disputes, the Sex Pistols split. Sid and Nancy were now free to follow their path to oblivion.
The effect on Sid of the band splitting up was probably felt more deeply than, and more suddenly, more deeply than anybody else. On the night that this happened, Sid went off and OD'd. Sid was turning blue on a mattress on the floor, I picked him up. I started walking him around the room, and he started to come back.
Sid Vicious has just 4 hours left to live. It's past midnight and Sid's been waiting to inject heroin all day. At last, Peter Kodik prepares his fix.
I knew the stuff was quite good because the person I got it from, I knew, and they said, you know, be a little bit careful because this is quite good stuff. So I knew it was quite strong, the heroin that had been picked up.
That's good, man. That'd be good.
I think I sort of opened the packet and show him what I got. I mean, you know, Sid's initial reaction would probably be, oh, well, I'll take the whole lot.
Beauty, you beauty. Go easy.
I said, no, this is, you know, this is good stuff I've been told is very strong. Be really careful. So, of course, you know, you tell anybody that, but they still do probably too much.
One can keep on taking drugs in order to get rid of the pain, to get rid of the memory. And this itself can lead to death, but that may not be the conscious intention of the individual.
a little bit of heaven for me. Yeah.
He was fine for, 10, 15 minutes. Then I think, he got up, he threw up.
There he is.
He went to the bathroom, threw up again. And sort of, I think, oblivious to it all. She got a little bit worried maybe when, Sid was throwing up, but she was used to that before. She'd probably seen Sid throw up a million times before.
Oh my God.
Make some tea.
Oh my God, no.
Jacques, make some tea, please.
My first thought was, oh, he's fallen asleep or something, but then I realized right away that he was overdosing. He started turning blue, and it was pretty scary.
If somebody takes an overdose of heroin, he can manifest the effects of sleeping, of having fluid get in his lungs, even have froth coming out of his mouth.
Come on.
The heroin acts to depress the brain function. They can't breathe right.
Sid, come on. Come on, buddy. Sid, what's my name? What's my name? Talk to me, come on.
It was like, oh my God, he's, taking too much.
Sid, come on. Come on, buddy. Oh, breathe. Oh.
The basic thing was to keep him up, moving around, and not let him lapse in or fall asleep, or to keep him going, pump some liquids into him.
Come on. Sid, pull his head up, pull his head up.
I had a conversation with Anne in the living room where I said, look, we're about 3 blocks from St. Vincent's Hospital. Do you think we should do anything, bring him to the hospital? And she said, no, absolutely not. The press will find out, they'll make another circus out of it, and he'll go back to Rikers Island.
Anne's insane gamble with her son's life pays off, and finally Kodik manages to bring Sid round.
He's fine, just stand up.
He came out of it. And the first thing he said when he came out of it was, I'm sorry I scared you all.
Sid recovers quickly, but the party is over.
The overdose made me very nervous, and it wasn't what we had planned. We did not want to have a heroin party. I talked to Howie and Jerry only, and we said, let's get out of here.
Sid has barely survived a heroin overdose, but already he's thinking about his next hit.
What do you need? You get me another hit.
After the pistols split, Sid and Nancy became inseparable. She declared herself his manager. They moved to New York and set up home at the Chelsea Hotel. They filled their days taking heroin and hanging around at Manhattan's punk clubs.
When I first met Sid with Nancy at Revenge, they seemed happy. And then over the course of the next 6 weeks or so, you could see that he was not doing well. I'd see him out at CBGB's and he'd just be sitting there with his head hanging, and Nancy would be handing him one drink after another.
Then, just 48 days after moving to New York, Sid's world fell apart.
Sid's like, out of it. And then the next thing he woke up, when Nancy's dead on the bed with the flick knife that Sid had bought that day sticking out of her stomach. And he knew nothing about it.
Nancy was lying dead. The murder weapon, Sid's 5-inch flick knife. But Sid couldn't remember a thing. They'd been on a drug binge with random hangers-on, taking 2-in-all, a barbiturate, methadone, quaaludes, and heroin.
He may very well have been completely obliterated. He may even been unconscious at different points based on the amount of drugs he ingested. Not just heroin, there was 2-in-all and other things that had been used and abused.
Sid claimed to have no idea whether he killed Nancy or not. From that moment, Sid spiraled into depression. Not knowing whether he murdered his girlfriend would haunt him for the rest of his short life. Sid Vicious has just 3 hours left to live. He's been charged with the murder of his girlfriend, Nancy Spungen, but claims he was so out of it, he doesn't know whether he killed her or not. It's the early hours of the morning in Michelle Robinson's apartment.
What do you need?
Sid has just survived an accidental heroin overdose, but now he wants to take more.
You get me another hit?
No. You've had enough for now, buddy.
I told him that was it. There wasn't any more left, you know, because he kept, oh, where's the rest of it? Where's the rest of it? I want to do more. Sid, you've had too much, blah, blah, blah. You know, be careful. So he obviously knew I had some more, so I had to give him a little bit more. The second amount that I gave him wasn't that much.
Within 2 hours of his near-fatal overdose, Sid injects more heroin.
There was no frame. There were no goalposts. He never saw a red light. He only saw green. Danger wasn't something that he'd ever consider. And he never ever thought that his life was important.
This time, Sid takes a small amount. As the drug takes hold, he begins to talk. It's the last conversation Kodik will have with Sid.
You know, we spent like the last 2 hours, you know, talking about, you know, what he's going to do. You know, he was due to go up to record this album, which is going to finance all the lawyers' fees, etc. We talked a little bit about Nancy and stuff like that. Yeah, he was fine.
After checking on Sid, Kodik makes plans to leave the apartment.
What heroin there was left, I gave to his mother, and I said, look, as far as Sid knows, there's no heroin left, okay? It's all gone. Give him this in the morning. She's like, fine, fine, yes. You promised, Beverly, you promised you won't do this. Yes, yes, I promise.
Kodik gives the leftover heroin to Sid's mum and leaves.
All I know is when I left the house at about 2 o'clock, he was fine.
Kodik is one of the last people to see Sid alive. His heroin intake is now being rationed, and he's making plans for the future. There's nothing to suggest that in less than 2 hours, he'll be dead. 4 days after being arrested for Nancy's murder, Sid was released on bail for the first time. In the days after Nancy's death, Sid was racked with guilt over what he might have done and sliding into a deep depression. His mother, Anne, and the Sex Pistols manager, Malcolm McLaren, became so concerned they asked forensic psychiatrist Dr. Steve Teach to assess Sid's state of mind.
It seemed he had a much longer depression going on from his childhood about kind of being treated second class by a society. He seemed to have no sense of purpose. The Sex Pistols had broken up and Nancy's death was overwhelming him. I mean, his coping strategy had been heroin.
The Sid Vicious tough guy persona was being tested to the limit. Facing a murder charge, the facade was falling apart, and more than ever, it seemed that Sid was capable of anything. Psychiatrist Steve Teach suggested that McLaren or his mother keep Sid under constant surveillance.
I recommended that they watch him, that one of the two people with him watch him all the time.
But they didn't.
The mother had gone off and scored dope for Sid around Union Square that night, 14th Street. It was easy to score dope in those days around that vicinity. And Sid had taken a light bulb from the toilet and had gashed his hands, you know? And his hands were sort of reaching out like this as we came through the door, and they were dripping. Both hands were just dripping with blood.
I got another call that he had cut himself when I come back over to the hotel. So I went back over there, and indeed, he had slashed his arm lengthwise from his wrist all the way down to his elbow area. And they had it compressed so the bleeding was contained. That wasn't in danger, but it was quite clear that he was now at a different level.
It was clear that Sid was not stable. Also, his mother seemed to be having problems. She was bruised. They'd obviously been in a fight together. She just couldn't look after him. But maybe nobody could at that point. I'm not sure.
And so we talked and decided that had to put him in the hospital and called emergency medical services to come over.
In New York, if you call an ambulance immediately, along come the police. And in this instance, Sid being such a high-profile character, it was going to be a rough ride.
When he saw the police, he ran for the open window and grabbed him, just held him, and then the police came in. I think the cut wasn't a suicide attempt. I've seen people, particularly in prison when I was working there, that cut themselves, and the usual report is that they're in such pain they cut themselves essentially to let the pain out. And I think that was much more of what was going on there, but nonetheless it was dangerous.
Sid was taken immediately to the Bellevue Psychiatric Hospital. Steve Teach was deeply concerned about Sid's state of mind and recommended he received long-term psychiatric care. But that didn't happen. Sid refused to stay and was released from Bellevue. In the weeks that followed, Sid repeatedly gave interviews to the press where he spoke of his desire to kill himself. In one interview, he claimed he wanted to be 6 feet underground and be at peace with Nancy. Unsurprisingly, this led the world to think that Sid ultimately took his own life. It now appears that this was not the case. Sid Vicious now has just minutes left to live. The party at Michelle Robinson's apartment is over. Sid is in bed with Michelle while his mother, Anne, sleeps in the next room. Sid has somehow managed to get his hands on the heroin. What happens next has been a closely guarded secret for 27 years. Some have speculated that Sid committed suicide, but for the first time, Sergeant Richard Houseman of the New York Police Department reveals what he was told when he investigated Sid's death.
Michelle said she was in bed with him. They were engaged in lovemaking, and that he decided to get high. She didn't want to let him get high. So in the meantime, he started to cook the drug up and wanted her to inject it into him. And she said no, she wouldn't do that.
Let's help me out a bit, will you? Come on.
I can't do it.
Why not? You can do it.
No, I won't.
It just takes a second.
I just won't do it. Okay, fine.
Yeah?
Yep.
Unable to cope with Sid's demands, Michelle leaves the room.
She came back out here into the front room, and then the mother, she told the mother what had happened, and the mother then said, well, I'll go in and see him. So the mother went in.
Sid's mother died of an overdose in 1996, but before she died, she made a remarkable confession to journalist Alan Parker. Faced with Sergeant Houseman's testimony, Parker has agreed to reveal her secret.
Anne told Michelle to wait in the living room while she went to speak to her son. Because he'd OD'd, he was in a very sweaty, shaky, horrible state, and he couldn't reapply the tourniquet, fill a syringe, or inject himself again. So she did. She reapplied the tourniquet, and she filled the syringe, and she re-injected him. And being a heroin addict herself, she knew exactly what to put inside that syringe that basically would have been enough drugs to kill 2 people, never mind 1.
With Sid's mother dead, we'll never know the precise motive for her actions on that day. But Parker believes she deliberately killed her own son as an act of mercy. In spite of the confidence of his lawyers, she knew Sid was terrified he might be sent back to Rikers, and so she took matters into her own hands.
And I only believe she did what she did because there was still that tingling thing at the back of her mind and at the back of his mind that he might not get off and he might end up being in prison for 20-odd years.
Michelle Robinson was outside the room, so there were no witnesses to Anne's actions, and the authorities were unable to prosecute. With Sid dead, the case of Nancy's murder was closed. For the New York police, Sid was the only suspect.
It's a difficult thing to have to come to terms with because, you know, I was part and parcel of supplying him with something which probably was responsible for killing him off.
If I regret anything, I regret not having been there.
Sid was a child, you know, he never grew up and never really had the chance to.
Gonzo journalist.
He was a genius.
Larger-than-life character.
Hunter, to his dying day, wanted to be thought of as an outlaw.
One of the most famous writers in the world.
Hunter is one of the funniest American writers in all history.
Hunter S. Thompson was a man whose life was fueled by drugs, alcohol, and the desire to expose the truth about America.
He represents everything that's wrong in this country, down the line.
He was worshipped by fans, loved by celebrities. But in the end, it wasn't enough. After bringing his closest family members to his home in Colorado,
he went as long as he could.
He wrote the final chapter to his amazing life. February 19th, 2005. Hunter S. Thompson is at Owl Farm, his ranch and refuge just outside of Aspen, Colorado. He's 67 years old. In just 24 hours, he'll be dead. At the beginning of his last day, Thompson's 40-year-old son, Juan, and grandson, Will, are at the farm for a visit. Also present that day is Ben Fee.
Hunter's family came up to visit, and they were to stay for the weekend, and it had snowed, and Juan and Jennifer and Will were playing in the snow, and it was family time. It didn't happen very often.
But underneath the seemingly innocent scene, Hunter is hiding a dark secret. This is the last time he'll be seeing his family.
I think he must have known when he asked them down that that's when he was going to do it.
But before he goes, he has a few loose ends he wants to take care of.
Juan, get your ass in here, would ya?
What is it, Dad?
Something for you there.
Thompson presents Juan with a few of his most precious keepsakes. 2 silver cups that are Thompson family heirlooms. The box contains rare limited editions of an unpublished novel and an Aztec medallion, a reminder of Thompson's wild days.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. It's yours, okay?
He trusted Juan more than anyone.
Yeah.
And he knew that Juan loved him a lot. And he loved Juan a lot.
I can't take that, Dad.
Damn it all, I said take it. You understand what present is?
The preparations for his death in less than 22 hours have begun. More than 3 decades before, Hunter S. Thompson exploded onto the scene when he wrote Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, a series of articles describing a drug-fueled trip across the desert.
You can read it out loud. It's like poetry. It's the choice of words and the images and the narrative and the voice. It's just brilliant.
And he understood the way that writing works as a voice and the way it's like breathing and the importance of its sound. Writing is a very intimate form of communication. You can't shout it to people because there's no sound involved. When you read something, the sound is occurring inside your own head, and it's a result of the rhythms that are created on the page. And Hunter was a great student of these rhythms, and he understood writing physically.
It was fast, it was rebellious, and it was deeply shocking to mainstream America. Hunter Thompson became one of the leading figures of the 70s counterculture. His wild, drug-crazed antics, his politics, and his constant questioning of authority made him a hero for generations of young rebels across the globe.
I think probably Hunter mostly will be remembered as the wild man, the drug addict, the alcoholic.
He crossed divides, spending time with both the Hells Angels and President Nixon. He was immortalized as Uncle Duke in the Doonesbury cartoon strips. And twice, Hollywood came calling, turning his real-life adventures into movies.
There were people who were big Hunter Thompson fans who had never read his work. They liked the persona.
But his lasting legacy will be his writing. He broke the mold, creating a new kind of journalism, where he and drug-crazed antics became the center of the story. It was called Gonzo. By the end of his life, Thompson could look back on an incredible journey. He'd invented a whole new genre of writing, become a cultural icon, but his wild lifestyle came at a price. His body was now falling apart. A broken leg, 2 hip operations, and constant pain meant he could no longer live up to the legend he'd created. In less than 20 hours, Hunter S. Thompson will be dead. His final evening is spent in the cozy confines of his house in Colorado.
I met Hunter Thompson in the winter of 2004 at a party at his house, and Hunter asked me if I'd stay up there to write and doing some filming behind the scenes, and so I began going up at nights.
Why did we bet on this game?
Once you stepped into the kitchen at Owl Farm, you were in his world. You could see a Tiffany's clock from a close friend right next to a petrified beaver, Muhammad Ali's golden boxing gloves, things that you'll never see anywhere else. It's really quite a museum.
Ben Fee has been living at Owl Farm for several weeks, helping Thompson write a weekly online column and recording his time spent with Thompson on videotape. Thompson's second wife, Anita, is also there.
In hindsight, it was the perfect setting for Hunter. He had his son and his grandson and his daughter-in-law, and he had Anita. And those were the people who he loved more than anything at that point. And he wanted them to be around for the release of his soul.
In the week before his death, Thompson wrote that for him, there were no more games, no more bombs, no more guns, no more wild fun.
He'd been talking about dying ever since I knew him, but talking about actually shooting himself for something like a year and a half, telling people close to him that this is what he was going to do.
He's now 67. He feels that going on is simply being greedy. All he's got to do is relax. What he's planning won't hurt a bit.
It was very succinct, very brief, and it was, I mean, the whole no more fun part is where the real meat of it is, in that Hunter realized that he just could not enjoy himself because he was physically as well as psychologically worn down like the eraser of a No. 2 pencil.
Unknown to his family, this is the last evening they will ever spend with Hunter Thompson. "67 years earlier, on July 18th, 1937, Hunter Stockton Thompson came into the world. He grew up in the conservative southern town of Louisville, Kentucky.
Hunter's early childhood was picture perfect. One could not imagine a more American family existence.
By the time he was a teenager, Thompson was already an important figure in his neighborhood. Lou Ann Murphy was his girlfriend.
We went to movies, we went to parties in people's homes. Sometimes we just hung out on my front porch. He was very confident, had a great air of assurance, and his body language just said, you know, I know where I'm going.
I haven't run across anybody who had the natural charisma that he had. You could walk into a room full of people, and the people would be gravitating to Hunter because he had a magnetism that none of the rest of us had.
His family wasn't rich, but Thompson wanted to be part of the Louisville elite. He used his charisma and early writing talent to gain access to the exclusive Athenaeum Literary Association.
The Literary Association gave him entree into that elite part of Louisville society, and I think he wanted desperately to be that.
A lot of them would be considered top young men in high school years in Louisville, Kentucky. He liked that.
But the picture book life changed forever when Thompson was 14.
His father, who had been this gregarious, quiet, but interesting, methodical individual, slowly but surely became fatigued, became ill.
A debilitating neurological disease was attacking Thompson's father. Eventually, he was admitted to the local veterans hospital.
And Hunter was completely powerless to do anything about it. It was a form of torture, you might say. And there he was, daily, watching his father wilt, wither, die.
On July 3rd, 1952, Thompson's father died. It hit the 14-year-old hard.
And I remember Hunter coming to my house at twilight, and we sat on our front porch for a long, long time, and then he would get up and pace. And I think he was just stunned.
An angry young Hunter Thompson started to lash out, vandalizing property and causing havoc around town.
He drank more than some of us did, and he had such a wonderful imagination. Instead of just drinking, he would want to go and do things, and some of the things were not great.
He pushed over mailboxes and smashed light bulbs and got drunk, you know, and chased after women, and he didn't go to school. It was fairly innocent, prankish, boyish behavior, which he sustained to the end of his life.
But now, Thompson, 52 years later, can feel his own body falling apart. He's in constant pain, and he's made up his mind. His death will not be slow and lingering. It's the middle of the night at Hunter S. Thompson's farm in Colorado. he has less than 16 hours to live. His family has come for the weekend and are now gathered in the living room along with his second wife, Anita. They've been married for several years. At times, it's a volatile relationship.
Hunter and Anita, they had their battles. They had their spats and their wars and yelling matches. They were like the Gonzo, Sid and Nancy. They could really have a go, but then, you know, they'd love each other right afterwards.
But tonight, Hunter is far from being the peacemaker. He and his wife are on a collision course.
At me. Loaded? I don't care if it's not loaded, just go.
Dr. Gary Kennedy is a psychiatrist who specializes in the effects of old age.
Sober as a judge. With increasing age, and especially with people that become physically frail, heavy alcohol intake has a direct effect on the brain. And what's important here is those effects can make one less conscious, less aware of the effect that your behavior is having on other people.
He's a very big human being, full spectrum. And that all the wonderful, exciting, good, kind, generous, all of that was absolutely true.
Not loaded. I don't care. What do you mean it's not loaded? You're drunk.
The dark side of Hunter was really bad. He was vicious.
The fear, you know, of having a gun pointed at you, it's pretty terrifying. So that shook Anita.
This was not fun. This was not a fun person. This was a really pained, angry, tortured man.
Hunter's antics have started a row with his wife that will simmer for the remaining hours of his life.
You know what? I can't take you anymore. I hate you.
Oh.
41 years before, Hunter S. Thompson had left the stuffiness of Louisville, Kentucky far behind and was living in San Francisco with his first wife, Sondi, and their infant son.
I was very happy to be a mother. I had these two men in my life that I was madly in love with both. And so it was a very happy time for me.
Thompson decided to dedicate his life to writing. He began traveling, writing freelance articles for a variety of small magazines and newspapers.
He wanted to be a really good writer, you know, and he was so disciplined. I mean, he was very disciplined. He wrote every day. He rewrote everything. When I typed something for him, I mean, it had to be straight edges, you know, I mean, and there couldn't be any mistakes. It was well done. It was re-edited, exactly the right word. That was his idea of writing.
Thompson struggled to make a living, but he was determined to make it as a writer. In the spring of 1965, he started an ambitious project, an inside account of what was then a little-known motorcycle gang, the Hells Angels.
We had the Angels over to the house, and I'm thinking, you know, these are nice people, you know. They're not boring, and they're not insurance agents, you know. They're really not. They're kind of okay people. But I didn't realize that they were, you know, they were also dealing drugs, they were killing people, all kinds of stuff. But I didn't know that.
After a year of research, Thompson wrote Hell's Angels, a strange and terrible saga of the outlaw motorcycle gang.
And he had to be careful with these guys, and he was.
When the book was published, the Hells Angels wanted a cut of the money. When Thompson refused, they beat him to within an inch of his life.
He was stomped, and really fortunately, you know, one of the guys, great, big, huge guy, got him out just in the nick of time, you know, because Hunter could easily have been killed.
But the literary critics were kinder. They loved the book. Finally, after years of rejection, Thompson had his first success.
Hunter just I never heard him. You know, he had been a kind of an unsuccessful journalist for many years, sports writer, pretty much scuffling and getting a lot of rejections and failure. For 10 years, he was not a success. And he came out with this book called Hell's Angels, and it was stunning. You know, it was just a magnificent book, and I'd never read anything like it before.
But at the same time Thompson was beginning his literary career, he was also beginning a long-standing relationship with drugs.
I remember very, very well the first time Hunter took acid. I didn't have a clue about what this would mean, but I have a little boy in a crib, and I was terrified. I was just terrified that Hunter was going to be violent. And then he asked me for the gun. And I said, no. And he said, I want the gun. If you don't give me the gun, I am throwing this boot through that window. And he did. And I was just really scared. Mostly I was scared for Juan. You know, I didn't know what might happen. And I reached up, you know, Hunter is 6'3", I'm 5'4.5". I reached up and just clawed. I mean, here the guy's on acid, you know, and I took my fingers and I just clawed his face, actually drew blood.
Thompson's next big literary assignment was an article on the 1968 Democratic Convention in Chicago. But demonstrations outside the convention center soon turned ugly. The police used tear gas, dogs, and brute force to break up the crowd. Thompson, the young journalist, was caught in the middle.
He was in the crowds, and he saw many people beaten. Some people that he knew, and he just, and he saw the policemen beating these, you know, mostly young people. When he came back, I only saw Hunter cry twice in 19 years. He cried. He was telling me the story of how everyone was getting beaten, and it made a huge difference to him.
Thompson himself said the battles with police were a turning point. Years later, he proclaimed in Rolling Stone that week in Chicago was worse than the most grotesque acid trip, that it permanently changed his whole chemistry. Suddenly, it became essential to confront those who had slithered their way into power and were causing these things to happen.
He was deeply offended about what was happening in America, as most thinking people are. It's a great dream, America, but the reality is really upsetting frequently to people who can see the options and the possibilities.
You are on private property which you are defacing. If you do not leave, you will be subject to arrest.
So yeah, he cared a lot about America. He was a real, you know, he was a Southern boy. He was an American.
Thompson was determined to somehow get into politics. When he moved his family north to Aspen, Colorado, he got his opportunity. He was asked to run for sheriff. He jumped at the chance to showcase his very own brand of politics.
It was different from a campaign would be now because there's an already established liberalist view of law enforcement in town. Back then, the sheriff before Hunter, Carol Whitmire, was your classic cowboy redneck sheriff. You know,
Marijuana laws are one of the reasons that has engendered this lack of respect that that cops complain about all over the country.
I think it's a good thing that Hunter Thompson is running, because I think it makes us all aware of the power that's involved in the job.
At least they have some new ideas, which is more than the old people.
Thompson advocated planting grass in the town's streets and punishing people who sold bad drugs. Michael Solheim was his campaign manager.
We would start with stuff like that, but then we would build into the ideas about the control of growth in this town. We were out doing meetings around town, mostly in the evenings at the various lodges and stuff, and inviting all the Aspenites to come and meet Hunter and listen to what his ideas are.
Remarkably, Thompson's campaign seemed to be gaining ground.
I remember one night we were sitting upstairs up there, and that was the day that it first occurred to us that we might win the damn thing. I said, what are we going to do if we win?
Okay, here's the totals. Whitmire, 204, Hunter, 173.
In the end, Thompson lost by less than 500 votes.
It's very hard to, to have a bald-headed lunatic. I'll do that for the cameras. All right! I've already made up my mind, as a matter of fact. This is my last trip in politics. Or this kind of politics. I assure you I'll be another kind of politics. I'm not sure which way I'll go, but it'll be one or the other. It won't be down this middle anymore.
Once the running for office thing was behind, he preferred to be plotting up an owl farm and, moving the pieces from behind the scenes. But he, when lending his celebrity to a cause would actually do some good, he wouldn't hesitate to do so.
Thompson would never run for office again, but for the rest of his life, he used his writing as a platform to rail against the establishment. It's the early hours of the morning. Hunter Thompson is alone. He's in constant pain. He has 14 hours before he will choose to end his life.
Well, physically, he was in crummy shape. He'd had a surgery or two, and, the bad broken leg and all that stuff takes a toll on anyone that age. So, yeah, he was in crummy shape.
At 3 a.m., Thompson calls Ben Fee and Juan.
Hey, Benny.
He wants company.
What are you guys doing? Tonight he's young. And at occasion is taking painkillers, which were not any better for him than they are for anybody else. And, lots of painkillers make you depressed, and they kind of make your situation seem more and more trapped.
Thanks. Cheers.
And Juan and I went over and sat with Hunter for a long time, for several more hours. He had a moment where he was scared that he was going to have his freedom stripped, his ability to live the way he enjoyed to live, with guns open on the counter. So we read his old works and tried to keep it light and upbeat, get his mind off of it.
You could strike sparks anywhere. There was
That sounds like the inevitable big deal.
It was about 7 in the morning when Hunter went to bed.
That was good.
And I asked Juan if he ever feared for his father's life. He didn't seem to believe that it was right around the corner. Juan knew his father and knew how it would end, but I don't think Juan saw it coming up like it did.
"35 years earlier, Hunter S. Thompson changed the face of journalism. He returned to the city of his birth, Louisville, to cover the Kentucky Derby for Scanlan's magazine. As the deadline for the article approached, the magazine became anxious to get their copy.
And they said, you have to send us something. He said, I don't have anything. All I have is garbage. And they said, well, you have to send it. I can't. It's not lucid. They said, send it to us. He sent it to them, and they said, this is great.
Even though Thompson wasn't convinced by his new style, others saw it as a breakthrough.
My view is that it actually was quite a polished piece. It was just rather of a radical style. And it was consistent with a kind of journalism that was getting more and more radical, starting with Norman Mailer on the steps of the Pentagon and Armies of the Night, and Tom Wolfe, the acid Kool-Aid test, and this kind of personal journalism where you put yourself in the story and you write in the voice, the narrative voice that you recognize. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll narrative voice. It was like the way people talk.
Thompson's new style was a break from his previous work. It was considered so unique it was given a name: Gonzo journalism. Whether accidental or planned, Thompson's Gonzo style became more concrete in 1971, when he took a long, drug-frenzied journey from California to Las Vegas with attorney Oscar Acosta. They're somewhere in the deserts outside Barstow, California, when the cocktail of drugs explodes in his brain. Suddenly, even the simple act of driving becomes fraught with frightening visions. He audio hallucinates a terrible roar, while all around what looks like huge bats are swooping and screeching. Thompson screams, "Holy Jesus, what are these goddamn animals?" What Thompson had put to paper was wild, manic, and like nothing anyone else was writing. He's still ogling and groping the American dream, that pale, exhausted vision of the big winner stumbling like a drunk out of an impassive and stale Vegas casino. The articles he wrote were turned into a novel, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Hunter Thompson was just 34 years old, and already he'd created a classic.
He could cut to the sort of essence of the truth of what was going on by fictional techniques such as metaphor or imagination or fantasy. He was brilliant, absolutely.
But more than that, he'd created a fictional Hunter S. Thompson, the wild, drug-taking, bourbon-swilling Gonzo journalist at the center of the book. As Thompson grew older, he would find it increasingly difficult to play that character. After a short sleep, Hunter S. Thompson rolls out of bed. In 4 hours, he'll take his own life. His wife Anita is doing her best to forget the fight of the night before. She gets ready to drive into town for a yoga class.
Morning. It's Mr. Bowie. Good morning, Mr. Bowie. Okay, well, you have a nice day, too.
The day begins like Thompson's days have for much of the last 50 years, with liberal amounts of alcohol.
Diggity dog. Protein. We're good.
It's very, very difficult to separate the writer from the bourbon drinker, and it never ever stopped. And it went on to his dying day. It was an essential part of him.
He was what I would call a professional drinker, and of course a famous drug user in a what I would call an intelligent way. That he wasn't a crash and burn sort of a guy.
Look, last night, is that it? I'm sorry.
At breakfast, Thompson tries to apologize to his wife Anita for pointing the gun at her the night before.
What? You know,
It was very difficult to live with Hunter. It was exciting. It was, at times, really loving and romantic. But I would say most of the time, it was very hard. Mostly because Hunter was so angry.
This was an impulsive person, attract and command attention, was a subject of adulation. He was novel. He was original. But with age, that impulsiveness ceases to be so much of an advantage. And when you no longer have the emotional high that comes from that kind of attention, how do you replace that?
I've been out of control for 50 years, honey. What's new?
I gotta get out of here. I'm going to the gym.
As his wife leaves, she has no idea that this will be the last time she will see him alive. "33 years earlier, after the great success of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, Rolling Stone magazine sent their new star on the road again. The assignment was to cover the 1972 U.S. presidential campaign.
Election day and elect George McGovern and defeat Richard Nixon. I'm concerned that Richard Nixon will be...
That's what this is all about. Thank you.
there was a feeling that this was an election that could defeat Nixon, that something exciting might happen. There wasn't such a clear distinction between the music and the politics. The music was going to set us free. That was our motto.
Thompson was supposed to bring the rock and roll mentality to the campaign.
Richard Nixon represents the dark side of the American dream. Richard Nixon stands to me for everything that I not only have contempt for, but dislike and think should be stomped out. Greed, treachery, stupidity, cupidity. Nixon represents everything that's wrong with this country. Down the line. He can't even walk. You know, he walks around with this kind of, how are you? I'm Richard Nixon.
Tim Ferriss was an editor with Rolling Stone.
A button he had printed up once said, you know, I'm not like the others. He wasn't like the rest of the press corps. Even conservative American political figures like Pat Buchanan, you know, would say that Hunter was writing the funniest stuff about politics they'd ever read. It was really astonishing material.
Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail 72 was a collection of stories Thompson wrote about the race. It was supposed to be released immediately after the election, but Alan Rinsler, Thompson's editor, was getting increasingly worried about the deadline.
He and I had exchanged really hostile letters prior to this meeting, because I'm an intrusive kind of do what's needed to be done kind of hands-on editor. I didn't want to just wait for him. I knew he was notoriously late with everything. And what I realized ultimately was that he was not going to write this book. He was not going to finish it on time. I would have to actually sit with him the entire time. Food was brought in constantly, though he didn't eat much because he was taking so much speed. And cocaine. It was a non-stop, you know, 72 hours at a stretch, collapse, 72 more at a stretch, collapse kind of experience. And we had tape machines in those days. People would come pick up the tapes, rush away to the office, and work all night transcribing the tapes, or all day, and bring back the pages, and that was the kind of way you had to work to get it done with Hunter.
Not only was Rinsler dealing with a writer who found it hard to write, he was also dealing with an author who was finding it increasingly difficult to find his groove.
He tried to tune up his mind through drugs and alcohol to the point where he was having like grandiose visions and flights of tremendous creative imagination. I mean, it's true. And he'd try to capture that. But then there'd be too much of it, and then he'd start to turn to jelly, and he couldn't think straight at all.
Finally, after a huge consumption of narcotics and a great deal of help from his editor, the book was written. Once again, it was a success, but from here on, the writing got harder.
I've been with a lot of writers, and it's hard for everybody, but for Hunter, it got harder and harder. It was a hard act. He was himself a hard act to follow.
The drink and drugs that had once inspired Thompson became a permanent fixture, and bit by bit began to rot his brain.
Absolutely, you can't do that forever. He was a big, strong guy, and he had a high tolerance. But after 40, 50 years of steady, daily, never being sober, I think it gets to you. A lot of people I know from that era either died or disintegrated or straightened out.
After more than 30 years of fighting against the political tide of the United States, Thompson is preparing to withdraw from the race once and for all. It's February 20th, 2005. Hunter S. Thompson has gathered his family for one last weekend at his ranch in Aspen, Colorado. On the last morning of his life, his knee hurts, his hips hurt, his back is sore. In 2 hours, he will shoot himself.
Well, Hunter was extremely free. He insisted on his freedom, and he exercised his freedom to a degree that's unknown to most mortals on a day-by-day basis. And I'm not just talking about freedom of speech, but freedom of action. And when that freedom began to be limited by the fact that he couldn't walk right, that he was in physical pain from a bad back and back surgery, bad knee and stuff, bad broken leg, I think the thing that most troubled him about it was the prospect of that he was looking at a permanent narrowing of his freedom.
He'd been, blessed with an athlete's body all his life, and all of a sudden it all kind of starts to fold up at once over a short period of time is going to be a horrible blow to anyone. So his physical problems were a big part of his life at that point.
He types a cryptic word on his typewriter. It's the last thing he will ever write. Its meaning remains a riddle. It's 3:30, February 20th, 2005. Thompson calls his neighbor, Ed Bastian.
Hey, Teddy, get over here. All right? There's gonna be some shooting.
Hunter was someone who never expected to be 30 years old, much less 40 or 50. He lived his life knowing that he was living dangerously and enjoying himself on a day-by-day basis. He always emphasized that it was fine with him if he didn't live a long life. And as he got older, he often said that he wasn't afraid to commit suicide, that this was a kind of an exit door that he regarded as being perfectly defensible.
Hunter S. Thompson has just 2 hours left to live. "26 years earlier, Thompson published The Great Shark Hunt. The book is a collection of his best writing stretching back to the early 60s. Thompson was only 41 years old, but already he was writing a retrospective. He compares it to etching words onto his own tombstone. There seems nothing left. He said all there is to say. Beyond, he can foresee nothing but a quick exit straight down, right off his 28th floor hotel terrace. No one could follow up his act, let alone Hunter S. Thompson."
Well, as you read his chronology throughout his career, one of the things that made him great was he took risks. He went into areas that were not necessarily safe for journalists, from his first work in Hell's Angels to the Chicago convention, and that riskiness paid off with his creativity. But also with that risk went a self-destructive strain.
Thompson continued to write articles for Rolling Stone, but nothing he did could win the same critical acclaim of his earlier works.
Once you'd written Hell's Angels and Fear and Loathing, you got to keep raising the bar. But Hunter's particular psyche and personality, he was, insecure, and he was, he was very anxious all the time.
So the money, the fame, the hallucinogenics, those are all different ingredients. And so Hunter began to morph. He began to change a bit. I had lived to help him be this great writer. Well, this great writer wasn't writing, and he wasn't writing great things. And I go, what am I doing?
Sondi, Thompson's wife for over 15 years, had had enough of the Hunter Thompson circus and left.
I had no sense of myself. I didn't think I could do anything. I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't this enough. I wasn't good enough. So when I left, I still loved Hunter, but there was no way that I could live this life anymore.
Thompson had become known as much for his excessive behavior as for his writing. Hunter S. Thompson, the writer, became more and more Hunter S. Thompson, the character.
And, when there'd be an event with a lot of people at our farm, Hunter would put on his sunglasses and the cigarette holder and the visor, and he'd become that public persona. And those of us who were closest to him would kind of back off and let the fans move in.
Ladies and gentlemen, Hunter S. Thompson!
Thompson began to cash in on his notoriety, charging large fees to appear in front of crowds of adoring students.
I saw him speak at Cal once. And he got up on the stage, he was so drunk, he just fell over and passed out. And people had paid a lot of money, and he was paid something like 25 grand to do that. He was on the stage for like 6 minutes. And that was his public persona for many of his public appearances.
I remember once Hunter was cited and I think had to pay a fine for setting off a fire extinguisher on stage at some talk he was giving somewhere. And he told me rather sheepishly that, I said, well, you know, why'd you do that? And didn't you know that it was, you know, there are statutes against it now? And he said, well, I thought it was expected of me.
But Thompson's wild antics weren't just for his public appearances.
I'm gonna blow the hell out of him. That wouldn't be good. Okay.
One of his favorite things was to get a gallon jar and fill it with gasoline.
I'm gonna move your gloves up, man. They're gonna goddamn get wet, you know that.
And there were these little exploding targets, but he'd attach them to a gallon of gasoline. The first time, he says, Michael, go into the living room and get a fire extinguisher. I go to get the fire extinguisher, and I'm standing about 20 feet away. He says, no, stand right here behind me. I said, Hunter, if I stand here and you catch fire, I'm gonna catch fire. So I'll just stand over there. He gave me a really disgusted look.
Fire was big, breaking glass. Yeah, blowing things up. Yeah, that's violence. That's chaos.
The first time I met him, he actually handed me, I'll never forget this, a fistful of lit Roman candles. They were lit. He said, here, wrestler, hold this. You know, and it was like, if you're gonna play with me, you've gotta be fearless. And so I took them, and then they went off and just shot into the air.
Yeah, Hunter loved loud noises and explosions and unexpected things.
There's a theory about drug abuse and alcohol abuse that, in a sense, when you start using, you stop growing internally. And you don't mature, you don't develop as an adult. You're stuck in 16, 17, 18. And in many ways, I believe that's the key to Hunter's personality. He was a big kid.
His public appearances and outrageous behavior did nothing to tarnish his reputation. In the late 90s, his most famous book, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, became a Hollywood movie starring Johnny Depp. And when John Kerry ran for president in 2004, he could still invoke Thompson's name.
I'll give you 4 words to put you at ease. Vice President Hunter Thompson.
But even though Kerry could use Thompson's name to get a laugh, Thompson hadn't been taken seriously as either a political commentator or a writer in years.
Later on, as politics moved in its course and the country changed, to keep on with that kind of political commentary would have required learning quite a lot about how the landscape was changing, and Hunter wasn't really interested in doing that.
I don't think the books were very good, the last bunch of books. He got into kind of an ESPN sports writing thing that was kind of hack work. He just couldn't keep it up. And I think that starting in 1982 or 3, for the last 20 years of his life, his work was just to make a living and to provide a new product for publishers who were willing to pay him large advances because anything with his name on it would sell. But the quality of his work, I think, really after 1982 just became repetitious and flat.
As the years dragged on, Thompson's writing was becoming increasingly irrelevant. As old age set in, he would rely on his favorite gun, a .45 Smith & Wesson, to make his final statement to the world. It's late afternoon. Hunter S. Thompson has less than half an hour left to live.
Hi, it's me.
His wife Anita calls from a local fitness club. Once again, Thompson apologizes for his behavior the night before. This is the last conversation Hunter Thompson will ever have.
Hunter was speaking with Anita on the phone, and they were reconciling, and he was speaking with her and telling her that everything was going to be okay.
Elsewhere in the house, Thompson's son Juan watches over his own son, 6-year-old Will.
How you doing?
Yeah, I'm at the gym. I'm finishing up.
This is a sea of Gonzo thongs, I hope?
Yes.
Well, listen, babe, I'm sorry about last night. Okay, I'm sorry, but I really love you. Come on home, will you?
Okay, I love you too. Hunter? Hunter? Hunter?
Come on. What's wrong? What's wrong?
No. Juan blew past me as I was on my way over, white as a ghost. I had no idea, but I could tell that something wasn't right.
I was with Bob Broaddus, our sheriff, and Bob got a call from one of his deputies saying that there'd been a gunshot out at Hunter's. And we all looked at each other and just knew that was it. That was it.
Jennifer and Will were horribly shaken. It was so surreal and shocking. I stepped closer, and Juan interrupted me, and he grabbed me and said, Don't come closer, please.
Go.
My son to this day and my daughter-in-law both feel that they are glad that they were there to take care of things and also to see him and feel his body, and so that it was very, very real.
Hunter S. Thompson died at 5:45 p.m., February 20th, 2005. He was 67 years old.
He was born a genius, and he was born with that charisma. And he was also born with that tortured soul. And where that comes from, I don't know.